Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayate Takshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. With the Divine consciousness, fill our hearts and protect us. So, dotting the day, as the pictures we may have seen in sketchbooks especially when we were very young, in order to help us sketch a picture, and if we don't have a natural flair for drawing, then sometimes we used to have these books with dot, and then if you just connect the dots, a beautiful picture would emerge. And we don't want to be doing that all our life. Eventually, we want to be able to draw a picture without the help of the dots. But dots can be very helpful. And not just in completing a picture, but we know that connecting the dots can be very helpful in other contexts as well. Even when solving a crime, for instance, there are all these evidence or signs that are sprinkled, and only an expert detective might be able to notice these different clues left behind. Or those of us who have have read Sherlock Holmes or Perry Mason, those are the only ones I remember during my days. I'm sure there will be more recent examples of books like that. So there are these clues and evidences, and then if we are able to connect them, then we might be able to solve a crime or find an answer to a mystery. Oftentimes when novelists, when they write a story, it's a short story or a long story, they need to have, at least in their minds, some connecting line of where and how the story will develop. Sometimes if it's a very complicated story, they may even write out the sketch and then fill it up with details later on. So these dots make a very helpful. That's also true with regard to our life. Does our life have dots? Because at the end of a life, what most of us would want is that our life forms a beautiful picture. And these different events and incidents and the choices that we make in life should finally add up into something very coherent in life. Now that becomes possible only if there is an overarching ideal or a goal that we have in mind. I mean, it's easy to say we'll take life as it comes, but if it is just a random set of dots spread all over, then it'll be, no matter how you try to connect them, it's not going to be a very pretty sight. Swami Vivekananda once said, if a person with an ideal makes 1,000 mistakes, I'm sure that the person without an ideal will make 50,000. Now, clearly, when we are very young, we don't. Sometimes we think about child prodigies and others. If there is a dominant interest in life we have, whether for music or sculpting or writing or anything, that can become just the overarching interest in something can become the connecting thread of our whole life. But sometimes it might take a while for us to recognize does my life have any ultimate goal? Besides the short-term goals we might have, what I want to do this summer or at the end of the year, and those are good. And we need to have these immediate goals before us. But does my life have any larger goal beyond all these smaller goals? And that will depend on what kind of time span I'm thinking about. So when we ask things like what is most important to you? And if I'm only thinking about the next 24 hours, then I would say, well, this thing is most important to me today. But if I think about a week, in this coming week, what is the most important thing for me? Then it might be very different from if I'm only thinking about today. But if I think about even a larger time span, what's most important to me in the next 10 years? I might have a different answer. And most people, when we think about what's most important, they think about what's most important to me in life. But then even the meaning of life can vary from person to person. Oftentimes when we think about life, we just think about life as we know it, as we remember it. We don't even remember everything that happened from the time we were born, but we know that this is my life. I was born at some point, and this life will end whenever death occurs. So what's more important to me during this span of life? That's one, we might get one answer for that this is most important to me. But then if someone expands that time span even further, not limiting it or not sandwiched, the life as we understand it, sandwiched between just birth and death, then say, what is most important to me? Not me as between birth and death, but what is the most important? And then again, we might get a different answer. So what I'm driving at is that the more we expand the canvas of our understanding of what life is, I would imagine for someone who expands it beyond these goalposts, so to speak, about life and death or birth and death, what could be more important than a spiritual ideal? What could be more important than God? Because everything in the world as we see it came into our purview, came only after we were born. And all of these things, everything is just going to completely disappear after we die. What will remain and what was there before we were born, what will remain after we die is the presence of God, is the divine presence, is the spirit, the self, the pure consciousness which never ever dims. So if we take this larger canvas, then it would seem that that is the most important thing, because that's what's going to remain with me even when everything else goes away. And then the question becomes, what am I doing to understand and grasp this most important thing, which will be with me forever? And that's this idea of dots is important because there is a major problem. Many of us who have tried to take meditation seriously have found in our lives. There are actually two problems that any meditator encounters. The first is just the reality of the senses that we have. The Upanishads speak about the outward facing senses. All of the major 5 senses that we have, of sight, sound, smell, touch, and so on, and taste, they are all projected outward. And they do their job effortlessly. In order to see what's happening, I don't have to, at least you have to go somewhere, I'll have to take some effort. But if I just want to see, all that I need to just open my eyes and this sense of sight just goes and grasps all the forms and colors. And similarly, the sense of hearing gets all the sound. But the effortlessness with which it is able to get things from the outside world, the senses don't tell me what's going on inside me. So they are great instruments to give me information about what's happening in the world, but not at all useful for me to know what's going on inside. And which is why many people don't even bother about what's going on inside. Which is why we oftentimes know a lot more about the world outside than about what's going on inside. And that lack of self-knowledge, while apparently having a global knowledge and global understanding, but no knowledge of who I am, is one major problem. And the senses are not very helpful. And the second problem is, even if I'm by some miracle, I'm able to turn my mind and hold my mind on the reality within, presence of God, the divine, I'm not able to hold it there. And that's what many meditators discover, that we try to think about the object of our meditation, the Ishta, the chosen deity. And we might succeed for a moment or two or more if one is adept at it, to hold the mind there. But quickly, the mind doesn't stick. It just kind of goes about everywhere. So holding the mind there is a word in Sanskrit. It also forms one of the steps in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra called dharana, dharanam, to hold it there. And that's very difficult. So how do we make the mind stick to the object of meditation? Now, both of these things, the tendency of the mind and the senses to go out, and even when they go inside, the inability to remain on the object of meditation. Now, both these problems, so to speak, in the practice can be overcome only through practice, because there is no medication, there is no quick fix way to do this. Just willpower and practice. So for the first problem of the senses going out, we need to spend some time at least every day with some amount of self-examination. Yes, there are a lot of things we all have to do. There are lots of duties, responsibilities, and so on. But still, can I, for a while at least, just be by myself, shut out everything, maybe possible, switch off your phones, don't look at anything, and just see what's going on inside me. In the beginning, if we have never done it before, it might be a little difficult. But slowly, it might become a little bit easy. And that awareness that besides the big cosmic reality outside, the world outside, the galaxies and everything, or how far you want to think about the external universe, there is a world inside of us. And when we say inside, we generally kind of confine it within the size of the body, and which might therefore feel as if the inner world is a little bit smaller than the external world. But the more we try to look within, we gradually begin to realize that the inner world is not as small as we think. It may be as big as the external world. In fact, slowly we discover it is much, much bigger than the external world. And if this inner world we know nothing about, then no matter we might be geniuses in the external world, but then we are totally ignorant about what's going on inside. And so this periodic self-examination and just the effort at doing prayer and meditation, because that's why generally when people pray, when they meditate, they close their eyes. And the closing of the eyes is really that I'm shutting out myself as much as I can, the external world, so that I can focus it on the internal world. So the world out there and the world in here, we'll have to recognize that the world in here needs our attention as well. We might, if we are lucky, at some point at least. A lot of times people, when they try to look inside, and most of the time the beginning is just chaos or just darkness, and the world inside doesn't look as interesting as the world outside. But if we persist, we might eventually discover that the world inside is a lot more interesting than the world outside. And the world inside is going to be with me for a much longer time than the external world. So it's good to become familiar with the terrain inside, because that's going to be with me for a long time. And the second, the problem about holding the mind on the object of meditation, that's where dotting comes in. So generally, when we start to meditate, oftentimes the teachers say, meditate at least twice a day. And the best times to do that are morning and evening. Ideally, in the texts mentioned, that the best times are, the word used in Sanskrit is called sandhi. Sandhi means joining. And the ideal times, by that way of thinking, is the joining of the day and the night, and which would mean the sunrise, and then each prahara in our modern calculation, an equivalent of it would be, I think, 48 minutes. So the joining of the day and night, according to this, if you just want to, again, you don't have to take the specifics of it, but the joining of the day and night would be 24 minutes before sunrise and 24 minutes after sunrise. That's 48 minutes. That's one prahara. Similarly, evening, the joining of the day with the night is then 24 minutes before sunset and 24 minutes after sunset. Now, this way of thinking is good, and they believe, the yogis believe, that this joining time, when day changes to night and night changes into day, the nature tends to be more quiet. And because the nature tends to be quiet, it's helpful for people who want to meditate. So that's why they speak about the twilight meditation, which becomes a little bit more practical in tropical countries when there is not too much fluctuation. And that might be very difficult, us here, and if you go further up north, because of the other responsibilities and duties that we have. So not to take this too literally, but it's helpful to meditate at least twice a day before we begin the major activity of the day, in the morning, and after the major work is done in the evening. And then because we have different schedules, our nature of work is different, that might vary from person to person. But it's helpful to find in our normal day, which are the times we can spare at least a few minutes in the morning and evening, more or less at the same time, and then fix those as those two dots in the day, the morning meditation and the evening meditation. And while there are many books on meditation available nowadays, hundreds of them, and many of them are helpful to give at least the general principles behind meditation. But meditation is a very generic term. There isn't just one universal method of meditation. There are really many from different perspectives, different worldviews, and different traditions. So sometimes it can be a bit confusing about, with all these different methods of meditation available, which is the method for me? Should I just choose the one that I like? or that kind of makes good sense to me, or something I find rather easy to do. What if, because any meditation practice does involve investing our time and energy into it. So we need to have some faith in whatever it is that we are doing. And that faith can waver, as it can happen with many other decisions we make in life. Did I make a right choice? Should I have chosen something else? And that can happen in meditation as well, because we practice for a while and we don't perhaps see much difference, and then we say, well, should I try some other method? Which is why we have schools and colleges to go to. Nowadays, a lot of the information is available online, but we still understand the utility of going to schools and colleges and learning the stuff from the teachers. What the teachers say may not be radically different from what is in the books, but still hearing it from a living person with some practical tips that may not be available in books is always helpful. It's like even when we first learn driving. Yes, of course, you might know the theory, but it might be helpful for someone who knows driving to teach us, give us the tips. I remember when I was taught driving years ago, one of our member devotees, a Vedanta devotee, taught me. He was Joe Dwyer. Some of you old people know he was leading the choir for many years. So he he taught me, and I did a pretty good job. It was very informal driving. And then I said, maybe I should go now. I have a test to get a license. And then he told me something which was very helpful. And he said, no, Swami, you better join a driving school. Even if you know how to drive, better to learn it from a trainer who's specialized in this. He might be able to tell you things in a more systematic way than I have done. And it was really helpful. And I got my license in the first attempt, which was good. So they would therefore recognize the value of learning something from someone who knows the path, who has done that before. And if that is true with all the other things that we do in life, it's much more true within spiritual life as well. So in spite of the presence of books, those who have received or training or teaching or instruction from a good teacher, they have found it's easier to make quicker progress. And those teachers oftentimes it's the best thing for every student is to follow the instructions of the teacher that the teacher has given them, because that's the best way to make progress. So in general, as I said, most teachers advise that it's good to do meditation morning and evening. So those provide us with 2 dots. Now, it's not very, unless one is an adept artist, with just 2 dots to draw a picture. And we might need probably more dots to help us. And so to these 2 dots that we have, morning and evening, we can add 2 more dots. And these 2 dots would be when I wake up and when I go to sleep. And that's something we all do without exception. Even animals do. They also fall asleep. They wake up sometime and they go to sleep again. So can we use these 2 other points in a 24-hour cycle to help us create some more dots? They may not be as prominent and big dots as the morning, evening meditation, but still some more dots would be helpful. And so that is why for many spiritual seekers, they have found it beneficial that when they wake up in the morning to try to make an effort, that the very first thing their eyes see, well, normally we sleep with our eyes closed, most people do, and so when we open the eyes, we want to not just see the ceiling or see something, it's just something, some divine object, something that will immediately remind me of my spiritual ideal. And that's why if near my bed, if I have something that reminds me of my spiritual ideal, then it'll be good if that's the first thing my eyes see when I wake up in the morning. What would be the first thing I want my mind to think? And the best way would be to, to just repeat a mantra or a prayer that the teacher has asked a student to do. So the very first thing the mind should do when it wakes up is to repeat a mantra. You don't even have to get outside your bed. You don't have to sit in a lotus position, nothing. Just you may be still lying in your bed. But as soon as you become aware that now I'm awake, just repeat the mantra. Look at the picture of a divine object. And then gently get up, of course, and then do the things that we normally do when we wake up in the morning, and then find a time to begin your meditation. So that first waking up, that dot can be very helpful. Similarly, if we can create another dot just before going to bed, just before we switch off the light. Again, the last thing my eyes can see, if I can see something divine before switching off the light. Now, God forbid, that could be the last thing my eyes ever see in this life, because sometimes people die in their sleep. And so it will be good that if it is the last thing for the day or last thing for the life, the last thing my eyes see is something divine. Or the last thing my mind thinks. Now, very few of us are lucky. Very few of us are lucky to fall asleep immediately as your head touches your pillow. We had one Swami, he was a disciple of the Holy Mother. His name was Swami Gaurishwarananda, the Ramai Maharaj. He went to Mother when he was very young, probably 14 or 15 years old. And if you get a chance, you can read about it. He had many reminiscences of Mother, very interesting. So he was known throughout our order as one who could sleep immediately. And people used to say, that's Mother's blessing on you. As soon as his head would touch the pillow, he would be asleep. He had never had any difficulty falling asleep. Remember, I met him when he must have been, it's probably late 70s. Probably in his late 70s. And so that time it was very customary because it was so well known that you could sleep so fast. So one says that, so Swami, how is so amazing it is that you sleep so quickly? And he said, no, now I'm getting old. It takes a while for me. How much time? He said, about half a minute. But that seemed too much for him because he was not accustomed to that. Now, if we have a good karma, we might get a good sleep like that. But other than that, some of us will take some more time to sleep. So you switch off the light, you're turning and twisting, hoping your sleep will come. And if something is bothering me, if I'm worried about something, if I'm upset about something, then of course it might take much longer. But generally, we try to make peace as much as we can with ourselves, with the world, at least for the time being. And when we try to sleep. So that time, when the lights are switched off, the last thing my eyes have seen, and I'm closing my eyes, but still sleep hasn't come. Now, what should I do during that time? And that is the time we can create this one more dot. Can I go on meditating even as I'm lying down in my bed? And the easiest way for most people is just repeating the mantra that they have, or saying a prayer, something to keep the mind engaged. And gliding into sleep with the mind that is repeating the prayer, repeating the mantra, is a beautiful way to go to sleep, actually. Every mantra has a certain rhythm. And those who are sensitive to music know that when a certain rhythm kind of goes on in the mind, it just stays there, even if you're not consciously thinking about it. And so once we get the rhythm of the mantra that we have, and we just repeating it, and then you fall asleep. But in a very subtle way, that rhythm remains. And then, when we wake up the next morning, we may not even have to consciously try to think of the mantra. That this might take time, but eventually we discover that if my mind is kind of going on in that rhythm and I fall asleep, somewhere it's just like when you're downloading a big file or something, and then you do it overnight. And then even if your computer goes to sleep, it's still downloading the whole thing. And when you wake up in the morning, the job is done. This is a little bit like that. So you go to sleep, but that rhythm goes on inside. And when you wake up in the morning, and it's such a joyful thing, you wake up and you find that the mantra, the rhythm is just going on. And it spontaneously then emerges and you become conscious of it. So that becomes one more dot. So now we have added two more dots, 2 dots of morning, evening meditation, 2 dots will waking and sleep. So 4 dots. I think it's good to add some more because 4 dots are not enough to complete a picture. And then that's when we need to be a little bit more inventive, if you like. What are the different cardinal points I can discover? Something that I do every day, which I can associate with just remembering God or repeating the mantra once. And most mantras are very short. They don't take like 2 hours to just repeat once. It can take just a second or two. And none of us can say we are so busy. Sometimes people say, I'm so busy, I have no time to breathe. That's a lie. Of course, people have time to breathe, otherwise they would die. But people just say it like that. So we all have time to just repeat the mantra once, and you don't have to do it aloud, just mentally. No one can say that's impossible to do. So we can go on adding more dots. Now, sometimes at the center we do it, and many people do it at home as well. We all eat, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or whatever time and whatever names you might give that different meal. So why can't I add some more dots? That every time I eat something, not necessarily only for lunch or dinner or breakfast, just even if you're just kind of popping something in your mouth, you say, every time I'm going to put something in my mouth to eat, whether it's a short meal or a large meal or just anything, I'm just going to repeat the mantra once. So before eating, at the end of eating, 2 more dots. And then if you eat more, then you get more dots. Then drinking water. So you're drinking water, tea, coffee. Before I take the first sip, okay, when you finished your cup, do it again. If your work requires you to drive often, well, every time I get into the car, every time I open the door of the car, I'm going to repeat the mantra. Every time I get out of the car, I'm going to repeat a mantra. So there are so many ways. Phone calls. Every one of us, we carry the phone all the time. So every time, before I text somebody, I'm going to repeat it once. After the text is sent, before, or maybe better, even better, before you put the send button. Because sometimes people send and discover, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. So before an email, if we are inventive enough, we will find so many opportunities in the course of the day to add these dots. Now, if all these dots are added with the express purpose and desire to think of God, then all these dots will form in a perfect shape. And at the end of the day, it will be a beautiful picture. More the number of dots we have, the quality of our morning and evening meditation will improve. And that's the great benefit. And finally, one simple thought. And it's a thought experiment. And we can ask ourselves, there is this innate desire in the heart that we want people to remember us. We don't want the world to forget us. And people do many different things to somehow find ways so that the world doesn't forget them. Some very wealthy people might make some big donations, have buildings named after them, projects named after them, so that even if they go, their name will somehow remain. And there are lots of theories about why people want to do that. It's a kind of a proxy immortality. Somehow the name remains. But I think it was this Woody Allen apparently was once asked, because he has made movies and which many people like, and so someone said to him, "You have become immortal through your movies. People will keep on seeing your movies." And then he said, "I don't want to become immortal through my movies. I want to become immortal by not dying." And so, of course, that kind of an immortality, just people remember you. But the idea is that something will remain behind. And so, if we are given a choice, we can just sometimes ask, how do I want people to remember me? If at all they remember me. Most people, we just forget them after some time. But at least those who are close to me, people in my family, my friends, for whatever length of time they might remember, oh, here is this friend of ours, or there's so-and-so who passed away. How do I want them to remember me? And oftentimes, the way we tend to remember people is to the dominant theme or the dominant characteristic that they have. And so if we see ourselves as spiritual seekers, if we see ourselves as devotees, if that's important to us, if those are the dots in our life that are more prominent, then apart from other great achievements we might have in life, some spectacular things we might have done in life, do I want people to think, oh, this was a great lawyer, a great engineer, or a great artist? It's always a great, very nice. But if I see myself as primarily a seeker of truth, a speaker of spirituality, then besides the other achievements I have in life, wouldn't it be good, some might say, people remember me first and foremost as a good person, but also a holy person, someone who had a higher ideal to live by. And so, but all that will become possible only I have created these right dots in the course of a day on things that are important to me, but also these larger dots in the course of my life with the connecting thread to my whole life from as far back as I can go till the end of this life. If there is some connecting theme, if there is a certain ideal, certain principles, certain values that I live by, then that is how I will be remembered. So there is a lot that we can think about these dots in our life and how to understand them and how to use that way of thinking to improve the quality of our life, something that will make our life more meaningful, more joyful, but also to the extent that it's not about, because sometimes wrongly understood, spirituality can become, it's like all about me. I want to be happy. I want to be free. I want moksha. So sometimes that I part of it can get emphasized more, than which really takes me away from moksha, if it's all just about me, me, me. But it's good to recognize that even for the good of the world, if I become a calm, honest, good person, filled with love, then those around me are going to get the benefit of that. That if I'm peaceful, they are at peace. And conversely, if they are at peace, I will be at peace. And so, in order, we think about bringing peace and joy and love in the world. In order to do that, the more amongst us spend some time discovering that peace, joy, and love in the heart, then whether we consciously do it or not, if it is inside, it will find its way outside. And so therefore, for spiritual seekers trying to discover the truth within will do them good but we'd also do the world good. We need at any given point in history, and certainly the troubled times in which we live today, we do want a sizable number of people who live with certain values, certain principles. Something, and this is a lot of inner work. What we do in the inner world, most people outside are not even going to know about it. You do things outside and it'll make headlines and people appreciate, and there seems to be an immediate recognition and rewards. But this struggle that we have in the inner world trying to find the truth, outside people have no idea what's going on inside. But if I make breakthroughs in the inner world and discover that truth, the amount of good I can do to myself and the amount of good I will do to the world, whether or not it's recognized as such, that would be a true service, a service to ourselves and service to the world as well. So give some thought to this idea of dotting the day, seeing what kind of dots we are putting behind in the course of our day, in the course of our life, and seeing or making effort, making sure that it eventually will form into a beautiful picture. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu.